All right, welcome to this podcast, Making Me Thirsty. Today we have a special guest joining us, stand-up comic. You probably saw him on Access TV Live from Gotham, touring the country. He was just in Royersford, Pennsylvania, and he's the co-host of the very popular and very funny podcast, Are You Garbage? And of course, he is a Seinfeld fan, and that's why we have him on, Kevin Ryan. Thanks, Kevin.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me on. This is great.
Yeah, I've been watching your podcast a lot. I mean, I've been head on in this thing, just going to your back catalog because I just probably got on my radar maybe like 3 months ago or so, and I've just been watching every episode, and I've been noticing you slip Seinfeld references in like crazy.
I do it too much, I think.
No, never too much. Never too much.
I know. I love it, dude. It's just like it's one of those shows that I've actually just reached a critical point with it where like I was watching it too much to the point where I'm like, I have to step away because I just signed up for Hulu and it's on Hulu. So for like 3 months, I'm like, I think I've seen this episode 4 times in the past 3 months. I'm like, what am I doing? So I've had to pull back a little bit because I don't want to ruin it completely for me.
Right. Yeah. We before we started having guests on our podcast, we went through every single episode and ranked them and did a whole thing. So it's all fresh.
What did number one come at?
Well, I would say our average. So we were both different, but our number one is the phone message. Actually, the phone message, Tippy Toe, Lemon Tree, when they're switching the cassette tape.
Of course.
Yeah, Red Dot was up there. But we can dive into that a lot. I'm
so
also curious. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. I feel like this is a key point. So, Kevin, you're 34, right?
Yeah.
And we always like to ask our guests, like, when did you get into Seinfeld, right? Like, well, no, go ahead.
No, sorry.
I'm assuming it was syndication because you're a little younger than us, so we kind of started like, 1990 pretty much when it started on Wednesday nights, and then obviously syndication, Channel 11. We're from New York, like it just blew up, and we got so into it. So like, what caught your eye right away? Was it like Jerry as a comic? You mean a comic or the actual show?
I don't know. It was definitely, I got into it in syndication. I knew it. I was obviously younger when it was on. Like, I remember I was even young. I guess, what year did it end? I don't know the
98.
98.
Yeah. So I remember my dad being like, we got to watch, this is like a momentous, like you got to watch this. Right. And he watched it a lot. And then it was definitely in syndication. I want to say junior high, high school, probably, when it was just all like, at one point I felt like it was on I was outside of Philadelphia. So I felt like it was you could just put it on and it was on, they were running it back to back a lot, I remember. And I just dove in. And then it's like one of those things where it just picks up like your language, So like me and my buddies like would talk and reference, and then that would just want you to make it watch it even more. And then if you even saw the episode before, you're like, oh, I want to watch this again because I know what's coming up. And little Easter eggs that you see that you didn't see before. So it became like a thing that we were just like obsessed with.
I mean, that's what happens with this show, man. You just start quoting, and that's a good question because when you slip the references in on your podcast, Are You Garbage? A lot of times, sometimes it goes over the guest's head. I think
it always goes over the guest's head. I'm not doing it for the guest. I'm doing it for Foley. I'm doing it for my co-host.
Yeah, because he catches.
We do.
Yes.
And sometimes he doesn't even catch it.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's fun. So when you're, what other? I'm assuming. I just know I watch a lot of comedy podcasts. If I know, for instance, Joe List and Mark Norman are big Seinfeld fans. I mean, are you doing that constantly with other comics, just outside of the podcast, just in the green room and stuff like that?
Sure. Well, it's weird too because so I'm, there's even like guys way younger than me, and
That's
guys
true.
and girls way younger than me that they just missed it for whatever. They were like young even during syndication, so they're like, they just don't really have a connection to it as much as I do, or the old like the Lists and the Normans and but one of my favorite things that we do is do you know Sean Donnelly?
Yes, I'm trying to get him on here, man. I know.
I'll tell him to do it.
Awesome.
I'll tell him. Me and him, we go to Patty's, a bar Patty's on 2nd Ave and like 18th Street or something. And our favorite thing is just to drink and then just talk Seinfeld. We what's your favorite? I like pegging people down to their favorite line, you know. So it's mainly we tell jokes and then just go talk Seinfeld most of them. That's the ideal life for me.
Man, you just brought up 18 and Second. I was a 1% owner of a bar on 14th and Second like 10 years ago. I don't know what right by the KFC on the corner there.
Oh man, that KFC is scary. What bar was it?
It was called Second Nature.
Oh, that's a pretty good name.
Yeah, pretty good name, pretty bad business, but nevertheless. So I think you're right at that cusp. To your point, like, I think 34, 33, like that's kind of the last like Seinfeld fans as far as demo. Anyone younger, it goes over their head completely. Were there any, like, you said your friends, I guess it was high school and stuff, right? You were kind of growing up, just getting into it. Like, were there any?
Philly? Did you grow up in the Philly area?
Yeah, I'm from right outside the city, so that's where. And then I went to school in Philly, so it was like my whole family's from Philly. I was a very Philly centric, and then moved up to New York about 7 years ago.
Yeah, listen, the Irish Catholic, I'm assuming, like, we love we love this Jewish guy from New York and Seinfeld. But were there any episodes what really just caught your eye, like, that you remember, like, or we mentioned our favorite episode. What are your, like, top 5? Do you have any off the top of your head?
I mean, yeah, dude. I don't know, and it's changed. I mean, like I told you, I went through like a binge the past couple of months of just crushing it over to the point where my wife is like, "What are you, like, again with this?" Like, and she's German, she's European, she just moved here from Europe, so she doesn't understand. She's like, "This isn't fun," you know what I mean? Like, it's just so not. I'm like, "Well, you don't understand. It's not," you know. It breaks my heart that my wife doesn't like Seinfeld. But I think I remember one of the first things that really resonated with me was, and me being like, this is the funniest thing in the world, was Bookman.
Bookman seems to be a favorite, yeah.
That, I remember just being like that monologue that he has in the apartment with, you know, you put a pair of shoes on when you come into New York. I mean, I just said that like literally 48 hours ago. I said it to my co-host Foley when we were driving through. We drove past the library. That I remember that, like, blew my mind comedically, of like, that's flawless. Like, that was the funniest guy to me at that time. I'm like, that's so funny. That was like, I still remember thinking that, like, holy hell, this was great.
PPs and wee-wees.
Yeah, exactly. The Chinese brothers. It's fantastic. It's flawless. And then, which I would like to ask you two. Now, this is, we're just pulling out our swords here. Who do you think? This is another big thing that I argue with Don Leno. You should also talk to Andy Fiori as well. He's
another one that's on my radar for sure.
Me, him, and Don Lee just drink beers and just debate Seinfeld all the time. Who is your favorite one-off character? Non-recurring character, one-off character.
So are you don't count Bookman there because he was in the finale?
I know, minus the finale, because the finale kind of walked everybody through. Yeah.
I know mine, O'Hara.
Go, take it.
Mine's Elaine's dad in Jack.
Oh, I've never heard that one. That one.
I think that's mine. I mean, that whole, well, tell them we're scared and we gotta leave. Like, plenty of ice. Like, everything in that episode.
Plenty of
George and Jerry at the best. Well, tell me I crashed. He was in the.
I can't argue that one. That's we've talked about a bunch. I mean, one off is hard. It's very hard, but I think, like, and I don't favor the later episodes, but I love Jean Paul.
I just watched that the other day.
Runner. Yeah,
great.
So
sorry.
And then, like, for me, like, Littman, I know he's recurring, but he's like, I think he's so underrated.
Yeah, we love him.
Elaine's boss.
Fantastic. So good. He's like sleeper fun. Like, he's like, he doesn't get enough credit. I've never thought of that. He does not get enough credit for how funny he is.
Yeah. Any
Klompus, too, is one of my favorites. Like, he's been in a bunch, but he's a secondary. Klompus is one of my favorites. He's been in a few, but as a secondary, Klompus is an all-timer for me.
Yeah, fantastic. I would go and this was, discussed over many a beers and many a yelling at each other, but the Moyle the Moyle was
the Moyle's
really
good, man. The Moyle's
if you go back and watch, like pound for pound, every line he says is a punchline. It's a kill. Like I could have been a butcher. Like all their. Like,
he's like a machine gun. Yeah,
it's just everything was funny, and it's like I don't think Bookman was up there, obviously, but that's a little too on the nose for me. I don't know. It's just a little too hacked to pick Bookman, but Bookman's fantastic.
Another one, I don't know if he was in more than one episode, but he's in one of my all-time. He's in my number one episode. I ranked it number one from the alternate side is Sid, the guy who parks the cars. Sid's up there for me. I don't know, just what he.
He's in a couple. He's in a couple because he goes, "Why? What's he?" He's in the parking spot one because he goes to George. What is it with you and like you can't park your car? It's always you jamming the street up.
One-offs are tough, but that's a good one too. Tony too from the stall we like too from hey, pretty boy Tony.
Dan Cortez,
Dan Cortez. He's a classic.
That was That's also I love that episode just because how George is portrayed, like the storyline of the man crush on when George turns his hat around. It's like the epitome of comedy. That's so like everything that he does as like because you're just thinking this grown man is so desperate to like impress him. Oh, it's so funny.
It's funny you said that about turning the hat around. We had Peter Melman on our last episode, a writer on the show. He wrote 20 episodes. He wrote Hamptons, he wrote yada yada. But I asked him about that specifically, not that move, but a bunch of other things that George did, like puts his head in the oven when he finds out his parents are getting divorced. Jerry drops his bottle when he finds out his parents are moving back to, you're staying in New York, not going to Florida. All these reaction things, like not knowing anything about writing television. I thought some of those had to be written in the script. And he's just like, no, that's all the actor, man. They just take
all their choices. Yeah.
And that's just, that's the how good those guys were. What those reactions sound just turns his head around. I'm down. Mark me down.
Oh,
so
mark
Kevin,
me yeah.
We've had a lot of debate. Listen, it's a great show, obviously, but 9 seasons. We heavily favor seasons 2 through 5, and you haven't said it yet, but I could feel it. Like you mentioned Bookman, you mentioned George flipping the hat. It sounds like early years are where you lean, but you tell me. Is there any? You haven't mentioned your favorite episode yet. We'd love to hear it.
I don't know if you can pin. I'm in a transitional phase at the moment. I don't know. I'm telling
best
you. Best
and worst though too. We like to hear the worst too. Like there's got to be. I love the worst. Don't like we love the worst.
Man, I don't know if I even ever thought about it through the lens of the worst. I don't even think. Oh man, I don't.
We'll give you our worst. How about that?
Sure.
The dealership.
The Susie, the Millennium, the Frogger, those are all down at the bottom of our list. To give you
it's so funny because I think I just saw them at a different age. Like, I love I love the dealership. I love it. It's so funny.
Tell us why. Like, is it the George? Is it the Kramer? What is it? Because I like the Kramer in the dealership. I give Kramer the dealership.
The dealerships with Putty selling the car, the candy lineup, the needles broken off. I love Putty. Do you guys like Putty? I feel like you guys don't like Putty.
O'Hara takes this one. O'Hara,
pull the plug. It's over. Pull the plug.
It's a tough one for O'Hara, buddy.
What else?
I know what he's going to say. I know what O'Hara's going to say right now. I'll let him go. Go ahead.
No, I like Putty. I like him as a character. I like him in like the thing with David Spade afterwards. I love it. A secondary character like him shouldn't carry the show. And listen, George at that point was just yelling. I don't know. It just wasn't like funny to the core of the show that it used to be.
That's the thing. And that's what you were asking with the seasons 2 through 5. And I never analyzed it in this. I never analyzed it in the sense of the arc of the whole show ever until this last real big dive because I was just jumping around and I had heard I was talking to Norman or List about it, and that's when I was like, oh shit, you're right. And then you see like there's a lot of the just you're like this what is that it's like very I do 100% understand that with the later episodes. Of course they aren't as tight, they're in this weird they're in this like kind of cartoonish world at times or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, exactly, which is not, that's the thing, it's whichever you prefer, right? So we prefer the other world better. It's just, it's almost like they made a shift. And really, it's the characters. And we talk about this a lot because we went through, in chronological order. And the shift mostly happens with Elaine and George. Jerry and Kramer stay true for the most part. It's Elaine and George who and part of Elaine getting different is Putty coming into the mix, her being all hot now, her leather jacket and her curly hair. And she's this, businesswoman. She's no more, as O'Hara likes to say, cutesy Elaine. She doesn't just do her thing. And so that switch is evident in those later seasons. George is yelling, and it's like, all right, we get it. But it's still, it's still Seinfeld. There's still golden, nuggets in all of them,
Sure. That just hit me because like I said, I never looked at it as like the whole body. I would just watch episodes. And the way I used to just watch it up and, even still, I go, this is going to make me laugh. And I'll probably see something that I've never seen or like, just something that I never picked up on or, realized how funny it was at the time. So I like blindly just open like wide eyed, like, oh, this is great. I'm just going to laugh at parts. You know what I mean? But I totally see the for lack of a better word, Bonkos version of,
it's actually a great word.
Like,
that's Regis.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, Kramer's obviously great, but Regis is the funniest man in the world. Like just as a character, like just as a person, like this guy's Broncos. Like that's how he was really just doing him on the show, which is great.
That's good stuff. I wanted to ask about, just to take a sidetrack from the Seinfeld, is your podcast, like I said, I've been watching and listening to the podcast for a long time, and you guys just kind of just exploded like in the last 6 months or so, I would say maybe. And the dynamic that you and Hank have is incredible. And just like, we had Al Dukes was our first guest. You probably don't know Al Dukes is maybe, but he's WFAN sports radio here in New York.
Okay.
He produces the show. Anyway, he came on our show because he was like, you know what, you guys have a niche, you're sticking to one thing. You're just focusing on Seinfeld and that's your podcast. And, you guys did that. Here's our niche. This is it. Are You Garbage? Every episode, you know what you're getting. You're getting your questions, and you guys are diving deep, and you're just staying in your lane. And it's so freaking good. And I'm just curious, when did it start? How did it start? Like, were you guys bouncing this idea around, like, of talking like on the side about Are You Garbage? And you said this should be a show. Is this the show? Kind of like Jerry and George. Like,
this is the show. I just watched that one too. We used to play it, not like as a game, but we would ask each other, like the first time it really ever happened was we were driving home from a horrible road gig in Altoona, Pennsylvania, back to New York. It was like a 4 or 5 hour drive or whatever. And Foley was talking about how much he loved drinking milk with dinner. And I was just like, dude, that is the trashiest thing in the world. Like, and that was I was just crushing. I remember him dying laughing. I was just crushing him. And then so like he would ask me about something, and then like I would give him an answer, and like so it was never like a game, but we always used to make fun of each other for how they grew up, how each one of us grew up.
Right.
And then he came up with a game. We used to have another podcast when we first moved to New York, and on that podcast we played it because we were all going home for Christmas or Thanksgiving, and he was like, find out what kind of soap you have, just like what, this, that, like all the little things. And then, so that was probably like 5 years ago. And then we always just kept it and played it and whatever, just it was always on the back burner. And then we were looking for a new project to, kind of dive into. And we both thought of it. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, that could be a podcast or like a video element. And he was like, and then out of nowhere, it was like out of a bad, poorly written movie. Like I was thinking about that all week in my head, just like it could be something. I don't know what it's going to be, but it could be video element or something. And because I started messing around with YouTube, trying to like, gain subscribers and stuff there. And he was like, I've been thinking a lot about Are You Garbage? I was like, oh, so have I. and then we were kind of like, let's just do it. And then the pandemic hit after we dropped our 3rd episode. So that kind of threw a wrench in the mix, and we went to Zoom, and we were lucky enough to lean on our more famous friends to have them come on and do our podcast. So it worked out for the better.
Yeah, I mean, you've had some incredible guests. It's a really good show, man. I'm telling you, you guys hit on something. It's so good. I gotta say,
thank you.
It's just really good. And
but we focus on the rhythm. It's all, it's very
organic.
Yeah, but it's like the Seinfeld rhythm. You know what I mean? It's not the same, but it's like we're so hyper aware of rhythm due to being huge fans of that show. You know what I mean? So it's like we have our own, but it's like
you guys have a really good dynamic, man. I'm telling you.
Thank you very much.
It's so evident that you've spent a lot of time together.
Too much, way too much.
You could tell. With that as a lead in, here you go, man. I put down some questions from Seinfeld references to ask to see, are you garbage type questions that came out of Seinfeld episodes. Because George is pretty garbage if you dive into some of these episodes.
Sure.
Such as, obviously the top one off the top of the thing is, have you ever eaten anything out of the garbage or adjacent to refuse?
Adjacent to refuse is refuse. I have not.
All right.
I'm a germ guy, so that's I'm more Jerry. Foley.
Oh, you're more Jerry.
George.
Okay. So have you ever?
Yeah.
Here's another good one from a George thing. Have you ever worn a stained shirt under a sweater? When you wear the Bosco stained shirt with the college.
I for sure have done that.
I love that.
For sure.
Movie does.
Yeah.
Such a good one.
Yeah, have you ever been caught at a red light picking your nose?
Yes, not too long ago. Really. And I was so embarrassed. It was it was bad for sure. And I thought of that same thing.
Ever brought Pepsi and ring dings to a dinner party? Tell you what, you put Pepsi and ring dings on the table, you really got something there. I love that line.
That's the puffy coat, right?
Yeah, the dinner party. That's one of my favorites of all time. That ranked in our where'd that rank for us? Dinner party?
That's a good, because that's also the babka. That's the double park. Oh, that's a great one. Yeah.
Actually,
top 20.
You mentioned a character, a one-off. The guy who stomps on Elaine's foot.
Sorry.
What? But that choice, that guy is so weird to me. He haunts my dreams. I don't know. I think about that guy too much. Talk about not fitting. That's just it was funny. It's just so weird. He's this cartoon. He was a comic book character.
Sorry. Yeah, that guy's
sorry. He had an eye patch too, right?
I feel like he should have an eye patch, but I don't think he does. It's one of those.
If not, he's doing something like this.
Yeah.
He's really heavy on his one eye. There's something up with his eyes. I'm going on the record.
Yeah, but
I just thought of another one-off, actually. The sniffing accountant, the guy that plays the accountant. I don't know. He plays off a Kramer really well.
He plays off a Kramer there. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of that, here's another thing I wanted to ask you, man. So the beer reviews you used to do. That was some good stuff, man. It's such a great idea how it's just everyone's 1 minute and it's just that's it, and you throw in the jokes, and it was really well done and reminded me of the Kramer chugging the beer with the cigarette. I don't know if you've seen a couple of them, how he just chugs. He does a beer review, but he just chugs the beer and then just slams it down.
Well, it started off. I thought the idea would be funny. I don't know anything about beer. I like a nice IPA. I don't really know much about them. Whatever. I like anything you kind of give me. And I thought it would be. I wanted to do a 6-pack at first. I just thought it would be funny if some guy chugs a bunch of beer and then goes, "Yeah, it's all right." You know what I mean? It's not bad. That was the original joke. But then I'm I can't chug a 6-pack. I'll be dead in 20 minutes. So I would just chug it and then go, "Not bad." But then you can only, I don't know. You can only shit on the beer so much. I can be well, this one, you kind of run out of jokes. It's the same joke a lot over and over a little bit, so it's tough.
Right.
Yeah, I just watched the one where you referenced the 9%. That's the cutoff. So now I'm looking at this beer. I'm what percent is it? So yeah,
was that the Mad Elf? Because I had one of those. Those things are those are vicious, dude.
Yeah, those things will ruin Thanksgiving for sure, dude. Those things are bad.
So, Kevin, you grew up in Philadelphia, home of some legends, Kevin Hart, Cosby, and Richard Gere.
It's a weird cross section you pulled, but I'm with it.
Is that a weird? So you came to New York, like obviously Seinfeld is like historically built around New York, and like now that you're living there, do you see any of the? I know it's the '90s, and like we pick up on a lot of things that like are not New York City anymore. But like, do you see some of the intricacies of New York City now that you're living there? Like, did you pick up on them more watching the show so closely?
Of course, man. It's like, you know, I'm living, or I would like to believe I'm living this version of his, you know, this thing that I've watched so many times of like, even when like, especially the comedy centric stuff, you know, like when he's in the club and Banya's going up before him or after, and Banya keeps going up after him. He's like, he's riding my wave, and then he's like, I'm tanking. It's just like all that stuff. Or when he's, oh wow, I just had another one-off character thought. The guy, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he's the guy who splits it's the Rochelle episode, The Other Comedian. He's like the big-headed guy, and he's
Dom
like, no, it's not Dom. Dom's plays the prop comic.
Yeah.
This guy I just Googled him like a couple. He goes, let me put we're riffing.
Yeah.
He's like, let me put my trench coat in your closet just for a few months. That guy.
Oh, that guy. Yeah. He plays an annoying guy so well,
dude. On the nose. It's great.
Yes.
Chula hates that episode.
I don't like that episode. And because of that guy, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he reminds me of Joel from like season 1 or 2, like, you know, the other
Mail and Bonding.
Yeah. Similar.
Who's Joel? I'm sorry. Who's Joel?
Joel's in the Mail and Bonding episode in season 1. Where Jerry's trying to break up with him.
He writes a list. Tickets.
I can't
put
the
hookers
with
Kramer at the end of the episode.
What's at the end of the episode?
He gets hookers with Kramer.
I might have not seen this episode.
Right O'Hara when he gets the hookers at the end, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh no.
Oh no, he comes. He comes back from the when they get left in Long Island. I'm thinking of that guy. That's the guy who gets the hookers.
Joel, Mail and Bonding, he's been like a serious actor ever since. I'm drawing a blank on his name too, but he gets Nick's tickets and Jerry takes him instead. He was supposed to take George, and George is so disappointed. Not a great episode by any means.
Not a good episode. He cries and Jerry gets he's crying. He's a guy. He's crying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I just looked him up. Yeah. I know who you're talking about. Yeah. And I see how you thought it was the guy who we got hookers with.
Right, it's a similar guy. Yeah. I always get those two switched in my head from the Stranded in Long Island, which again, not one of my favorite episodes either.
Yeah. It's so funny. You guys have me now looking at it through a negative lens. You might have ruined Seinfeld.
Hey,
we
pick it apart.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Like we talked to Peter Melman, right? He was like there from the beginning, and he agrees. He's like, season 7 through 9 just got away from what the core of the show was. We still love it. There's still great episodes, right?
Of course, yeah.
To your point, like when you're flipping around, you're not going to turn it off. But when you sit there and analyze 168 shows, you're like, you have to, you gotta.
Of course, no, I totally get it.
I mean, the rise from season 7, and we had this. Me and O'Hara had this out. We had it out when we reviewed that season. We ranked every episode. He refused to put a season 7 in the top 100. And I was like, the rise got to be there. I landed.
He's got it out for season 7.
Yeah, he just wouldn't do it. And,
I got problems, but but I got to stick to my guns. You know what I mean? Like, it's.
He was that way the whole way through. That's it. He stuck to
discipline. I'm looking at who's directing the episode, the whole thing.
Yeah, we're big Tom Sharoni's guys. He directed pretty much everything up until season 5, right? And then, so Larry David was still there in 6 and 7, but it was Ackerman was directing at that point. And that's when you really kind of see the first switch.
You see it, yeah.
So, Kevin, did you ever, have you ever, met Jerry or connected from anyone from the show? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I haven't. Seinfeld, over the past 2 or 3 years or so, he'll pop into Gotham Comedy Club. That's he's got a really good relationship with the owners there. So he'll say hey, I'm coming through. And then they kind of change everything. I've never seen him. I don't. He keeps obviously. I mean, he keeps a very tight circle, and like he's all business. From what you hear, like I talked to Norman about it. He's in and out, and he like doesn't because like Norman opened up for him and stuff like that. So he's like real. He doesn't. He's not hanging around. You know what I mean? Like some guys, like some of the bigger guys will come and like have a beer at the bar or whatever. Like he's just in another stratosphere. You know what I mean? So I've never seen him.
Speaking of that beer reference, like it's funny about the show, like they never go out and have a beer, it's always like grabbing a cup of coffee, So maybe there's something to that maybe he's not hanging out after. I don't know, because that was weaved throughout the show that they never did that.
Yeah. I don't know if he's a big drinker. I did hear one story when he yelled at Louis. Did you ever hear that story? Barry Katz tells it. Barry Katz is this like some say infamous comedy manager. And I think so. Barry Katz was booking shows in like outside Boston, like in New England area, and he booked Jerry for a run of like 5 shows or something, like to come up 5 nights, do these 5 shows, and it was 8:00 and people were still funneling in, and Louis was opening up for him, and he was like. He went up to Barry. He said, "Barry, we got to start the show." He goes, "Yeah, we will in a couple of minutes. People are still coming in." And he pointed to his watch. He said, "The show time is 8:00. Start the show." And he goes, we're going to put – people are still sitting down. Once they sit down, he goes, "That's what the effing opener is for." Meaning like have them be seated while he's on. Like I run it – like I'm going on stage at 8:20 or whatever. Like he was very – and then Barry was like, "I'm devastated. I just, this was my big shot to impress Jerry Seinfeld. And, he's yelled at me in the first 10 minutes or whatever." So he goes and sits. And then afterwards, like Louis and him are having a beer Louis and Jerry are having a beer at like some table after the place like emptied out. And he was like, "Barry, come over, like have a beer with us." And that's the only time I ever heard of him having a beer, it was like, ever, and like you don't like, especially I don't know if you've ever watched Comedian, the documentary Comedian. He doesn't have you never see him drinking in there. Like he's like, so it's like that's what stuck in my head was that he was having a beer after a show. I'm like, that's crazy because you never see that or hear that,
Right. Well, he invited him over after too, which is a good sign.
That's what Barry said. Barry goes, he's just a consummate professional. Like
8:00.
He goes, the contract's at 8:00. You started it. I don't care if the guy in front of me has to die. I'm like, this is what the rules we're playing by. And that's Barry Katz took that as like a lesson of, like it's not just all pleasure, it's business. You know what I mean? At the end of the day.
Right. Time is what it's indicating there from the serial letters. Yeah. He also another great Louis story is Louis brought up, I'm like just telling other comedian stories about Seinfeld at this point. Louis brought him up as the greatest comedian ever. Goes, I've heard that one. I think you might tell that on that roundtable they did on HBO like years ago.
It might be that. And he pulls him aside. He goes, "Don't you ever say that." He goes, "You're setting me up for failure." Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, no, I think like the thing with I'm just curious, like in the comedic scene, like is he? I'm just trying to compare it to like sports, right? Like no one criticizes Michael Jordan anymore. Like God forbid, right? I can. I think LeBron's better at this point, but whatever. But like, does that like is Jerry just like untouchable, like because of what he's done, because of the show? Like
he is with a certain cut of comedians, right? With me and my friend, like the people would label it more mainstream comedians, like that are in the clubs and stuff like that. There's also then this whole other, they call it like the alternative or like the Brooklyn scene, which they think he's just like trash, always been like, what's the deal? Like he's like, oh, what do you like? We're not talking about airplane peanuts over here. Like, and I obviously I'm biased. The show is fantastic. His stand-up at a time was fantastic too. Like he was the epitome of
for sure
a stand-up comedian. I think it's just in my eye. If he ever hears this, I'll fucking jump off the GWB. But he it doesn't age well, right? Like the art form as its whole, like, you know, even take like.
Yeah, but his new stuff is good though. I saw him in Scranton like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and my belly was hurting. I was laughing.
I would also argue that you're biased as well.
Sure,
right?
sure.
So,
and the crowd, I was the youngest person in the crowd, and I was 40
The
years old.
guy, I think he's lost a little off the fastball.
I mean, the new Netflix it wasn't great, I agree. But when I saw him at that show, I mean, you're right, though. I did have a bias going in.
I think it's just like, it's tough. You see these comedians go up and like talk about these deep or these, you know, personal things or, you know, just anything, right? Like take like Louis, or, you know, I don't know, or whoever, you know, take Chappelle or, like, you know, Bill Burr, who's like tackling like some sort of race thing, that something, you know, and then he's like, you get on the train, you take an Uber. You're like, what? Like, what are we talking? This is a tweet at this point.
Did you see him? Did you happen to hear Jerry on Mark Maron, though? Because Maron brought a lot of this stuff up, and Jerry's like, the first #1 rule is to be funny, man. I don't care about all that other stuff. Just be funny. I agree with Jerry on that one. Like, all these comedians, it's very hard to do both, so just be funny first.
I completely agree. But he just lost, like you said, he lost a little speed off the fastball. I mean,
and it's
I wouldn't want to follow him, you know.
No, but it's easy to say that when you got, you know, $500 million in the bank on syndication. You know,
right? He doesn't have to go out there at all, right? I mean, at least
the fact that he is. I mean, he's a pure comedian.
He's a purist.
He's a pure nuts and bolts. Yeah. Get me in there, give me the wrench, and let me figure it out. I mean, watch him in Comedian. That's like my vibe. I watch it like 4 times a year just to like recharge me of like, man, I love what I'm doing, because I'm doing that. But like running around to sets, and you're hopping in a cab, you're trying to, you know, get on a subway to make your spot. It's like, well, that's what I'm doing. So like, I watch that to charge me up. And the fact that he's still doing it, it's like, it's unheard of.
But at the end of the day, Kevin, like the show, like forget about him as a comedian. The show, like it seemed to just inspire you as a kid, like, and draw it up that like comedic thought process, etc., right, with your friends, and then obviously like this is what you're doing for a living, right? Because of the show.
Largely, yeah. It's like, I mean, that gave me, especially like my formative like high school years or whatever, you know, I forget when I really sunk my teeth into it. It was like high school and college. Like, it's just in my head, I've been watching it forever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know when I've just been constantly watching Seinfeld whenever it's on, you know. It's like, so I think it's definitely I look through the Seinfeld lens, you know what I mean? Like, even just like the question of like, that's weird, why are you doing it that way? Like, you know, and then it's just like one of the funniest things I just took a picture or a video on my phone the other day and sent it to my buddy. It's the dog that coughs with Kramer.
Yeah.
The dog cough to me and my buddy is so funny. And like, but I don't even know when that started. I remember being like a kid and like me and him thinking that's funny. And we still do like 20 years later or whatever. So it's like, I'm just living in the world at this point, all through the lens of the show, I think, you know.
Of course, I use that line all the time. You can't see a dog, a pig. I did it all one day. I go to a vet all the time. Like, that's a great. Great
that's also the same cadence and rhythm of I don't memorize lines. I memorize colors: red, blue, green. You know what I mean? He's out in LA.
That's a good pull right there. That was a good pull you just had. That was a good line. That's not a.
I have one question for you guys. What is your favorite line? It doesn't have to be the funniest or whatever. Just like what do you think is just like a super funny, where you're like, it's, you know, if you had to, it's a tough one. This is what we always get drunk and debate.
Three just pop in my head right away. I don't want to give any order, but from the Hamptons, Kramer, after he tells he saw Jane topless, he just walks away and says, "She's got a great body, buddy." Always love that one.
Yeah.
It's a little cliche, but get a good look. And then Costanza, obviously.
Sure.
And then just anything around Penske material, right? You are aware. And then just leave it at that. So those are like 3 that just pop right away.
Sure.
We're actually gonna set up a best lines bracket.
Oh, great!
So yeah,
fantastic idea
for people to vote. But those are my like first 3 that came to my mind.
I got some odd ones. I mean, this is a weird one from the Pez dispenser. The guy from the from the Polar Club. Intervention. Who's intervening? I don't know why I love that line, but I do.
Yeah, that guy's awesome.
I always liked, and this is an odd one too, from the statue in season 2 that there's no big coincidence and small coincidences, only coincidences. The lady's telling Elaine on the thing in the elevator.
Yeah.
Dressed based on mood, George said when they're in California. I love. I think George. I mean, my all-time favorite. Now, just popping as I'm talking. My all-time favorite is probably George to Lippman. When he gets caught having sex with the cleaning woman, and he just says, "Was that wrong? Should I not have done that?" Yeah. That always gets me. Whenever we always talk about this, whenever George is behind a desk in any type of situation, whether it's with the lady from unemployment or Mr. Lippman or the bra salesman, or whenever he's behind a desk, it's classic George.
Yeah. One of my go-tos is. That was a sleeper, I guess. I just picked it up again in the last thing, and I think it's so funny. It's when Morty and Klompus, I forget what episode it, why they're down in Florida, but he's cutting them the check for the 1965.
The pen.
The pen. It is the pen. Yeah. And he's cutting them the check for the 1965. I think in 1965, it's something along that line. And he goes. So like Morty leaves the Klompus leaves and the pen thing, and George or Morty's talking about he's still caught on the fact of the check, yes. And he goes he didn't have a Coke. It's like the fun, like he still can't get over the fact that Klompus is lying about having a Coke and he didn't have a Coke.
Very good. That's a great one. I mean, the alternate side. I love when the guy has the stroke and they're trying to revive him.
Who put cookies in his mouth when I was like a teenager?
Who put cookies in his mouth?
I remember that was like the epitome of fun. No, you raise the feet to get blood to the extremities. What's an extremity? Who put cookies? It's like the greatest, like who's like, combination of one line.
Jerry's least favorite episode, by the way.
Yeah, Jerry's least favorite and my favorite.
Why? I know that, but why? I've heard that.
He thought it was kind of out of line.
Having the guy get a stroke was out of line. But
I've heard
killing Susan, that's all. That's cool. We're good with that,
Yeah. Huh.
This has been great, man. This has been great.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
We really appreciate your time, dude. This is, we could talk Seinfeld for all night long, but
thanks for having me.
And listen, I think your number one job is to get your wife to enjoy the show. That's it.
It's also obviously it's in my vernacular, it's in my vocab. I like just all the things and the rhythm of things that I say, and she'll laugh at it. I go, that's Seinfeld. You're laughing at Seinfeld. You know what I mean?
Well, you said she's offended by the wasn't there a German tourist episode?
Kramer, Rob and George.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Could be. I don't know if she saw it. Maybe she watched it on her own, and that's the thorn in her side.
Well, Kevin, it's great. It's great talking with the true Seinfeld man. This was awesome.
Oh, I appreciate it. I was nervous coming into this. I thought I was gonna get.
You were nervous, man. I was nervous because I felt like I was messaging you too much. I'm like, he's not gonna come out.
No. It was perfect. It was. I'm sorry. I appreciate you making it work with my schedule.
Yeah, of course, man. This is. We could talk Seinfeld. We could talk Seinfeld all day. But seriously, everyone, check out Are You Garbage? It's amazing. It's really good, dude. I love what you guys are doing. It's just. There's so many podcasts out there, and to find one that's just like original. That's just like, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna stick to this. It's original. I don't know, man. You guys really work well together. The way you play off each other, it's really good.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, man. Well, thank you again. We'll let you go. Thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys. Take it easy. Have a good night, man.
Thanks, Kevin.
See you, buddy. Let me know when this comes out, all right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I'll retweet it and post it, whatever you need.
Awesome. We really appreciate it.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you.